Have you ever asked somebody to do something and then you did it yourself? Or perhaps you had an intuitive knowing, yet you didn't go with your gut? These are signs that you're not trusting yourself or even those around you. So, when does this come into play? This comes into play in many different ways at many different times throughout our lives. So for me, I was overworked, overwhelmed, stressed out, felt guilty, all of the things, all of the time. Because why? I wasn't trusting. I was asking people to do something and then going and working on it. I would ask my partner to do something and then I felt like I had to do it anyways. I would ask my kids to do something and I felt like I had to do it anyways. There was no trust in the relationships that they would hold up their end of the bargain. It's like I was the only one that had to hold up the end of the bargain. But here's the biggest thing that I was doing is I wasn't holding up my end of the bargain for me. I wasn't doing what I needed. I wasn't trusting myself. I would say I would do something for my mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual well-being, and then I wouldn't do it. You see, I wasn't doing what I needed. I wasn't trusting my soul or myself. And so I've gone on a very long journey of healing, of leaving situations and experiences that that no longer served me, and stepping into different roles throughout my timeline to align more with my soul's purpose. Now, along this journey, I have done thousands of hours of healing and holistic education, and even getting my master's in women's spirituality, in which we focus also on trauma. And so I've had the ability and the privilege to take trauma courses and to learn spiritual healings around trauma. It has been a true honor and privilege to learn what I've learned and to be able to use it on myself and to support others. And so what I want to do today is share with you a few of the tools that I have learned and also some of the impacts that trauma has on our life. Okay, so let's get started. So what keeps us in the cycle? So there's many things that keep us in the cycle of trauma. One is that we're just not aware of it. For me, I lived my whole life. I was an overachiever. I was, like I said, stressed and burned out. And I kept doing, and I would overdo, and I would overgive. And I would have no time for myself. And so when I was so busy, there was no time to become aware of what the cycles were, of what the patterns were. So I had to slow down and come within so that I can gain access to solutions. So I could gain access to solutions, and I still do this. I go within to gain my answers so that I could start living a life that felt more aligned to me. Because what happens in trauma, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, what happens in trauma is trust is severed. We feel disempowered and we feel disconnected. And so we're looking for these things to empower ourselves and to feel reconnected and to trust more, but yet we're still playing out the same cycles. So this is from research that I studied within my master's program, and I just want to share a little bit. You can find this on my blog, From Trauma to Trust, Understanding the Impact and Finding Your Path to Healing. So there's more symptoms in here. I'm just going to list a couple. One is emotional reactivity. So we respond in a way that may not seem appropriate or maybe even overbearing for the situation. As an example, perhaps, so I'm going to use examples from my own personal life. When my oldest daughter was young, I hadn't yet started my spiritual awakening or my healing journey. And so I was still living in that very prevalent trauma response. So I would, if she spelt milk or whatever it was, or if she spelt something, I would get overly upset. Now, times have completely shifted, and now if something is spilled in my home, I say, okay, great, well, the floor needed to be cleaned anyways, or the counter needed to be cleaned anyways. But then it was so reactive. What were you doing? What were you thinking? How could you do that? So those emotional reactivities that come up can be a sign of trauma, of past trauma. And there's many different variants of trauma. I'm not going to get into those details here. I have another blog on that, but I just want to honor that whether our trauma is what some may call a little t trauma or a big T trauma, the varying spectrum of trauma, it all is important and it all matters and it's all worth healing, and you are worth receiving healing. And so Let's talk a little bit about the impacts. So I talked about trust. Another thing that happens when we experience trauma, and I will give a personal example. So a personal example of experiencing trauma could be watching your parents fight or argue. So when I was young, my parents often fought about money. They were both teachers, and we didn't have a lot of money. Poor teachers, they do amazing work, and they spend so much time with our children, not just one, but about 30 of them, and they don't get paid very much. And so we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So my parents constantly fought about money. And so that was a very traumatic situation for me, always watching these fights about money. Let me be clear, my dad yelled and my mom just kind of stood there. But it was a very traumatic experience because I wanted my mom to say something and she wouldn't say something. So then when I grew up, I needed to be overpowering and try to control the situation. Anytime money came up, I had to be in charge. Okay, so that's how it impacted me. Also, I learned that money was power, right? My dad controlled the finances, and so it seemed like he had the power. So then I thought, well, money must be power, so I need to make a lot of money. That was another trauma response for me. Instead of doing something that I absolutely loved to do, I did something that I knew I would make a lot of money. And it did, and it provided well for me, but then I realized I'm living a life based on what others want for me, but also based on my own trauma responses and how I'm coping with my trauma instead of actually healing it. So the key to overcoming trauma is healing and building that trust within ourselves and in our community. So I teach in my community the 3-step rediscovery process. I also teach it in my book, Reclaim Yourself, and there's 3 steps, and it's all about coming within yourself and reconnecting to yourself and healing. So the 3 steps are: number 1, and you can go into the blog and I walk you through this, and it's all about reestablishing trust within yourself, okay? So step number 1 is to realize. So we realize when we're having an experience in which a trauma response is happening inside of us. Maybe we're living in a cycle in a relationship in which we are causing a fight or making a passive-aggressive comment. Even though there's a part of us that knows this isn't the step that we need to take, there's another part that is overpowering. Or maybe we lose our temper on something or someone. So we start to notice that there's a pattern, or your emotions are huge indicators, right? How you feel inside is the indication of the trauma response. And then the behavior that follows is either acceptable or completely unacceptable, inappropriate behavior. And then we feel guilty, or we feel shamed, or we say we're never going to do it again, and then we do it again, and then we feel even more guilty. So this is all about understanding the process of ourselves, understanding how we can best support ourselves throughout this healing journey. Okay, so step 1 is to realize we become aware. We become aware of how we feel. So let's say that I yelled at my child, or that I made a remark towards a partner, or that I made a mistake at work. By the way, when I made mistakes at work, I was so overly critical of myself. It was overwhelming. The negative self-talk was insane. Also part of trauma response. So what we do there is we say, okay, this is how I feel. This is how I feel. I feel angry, or I feel upset, I feel disappointed, whatever it may be, whatever's coming up for you. And then we go below the feeling. So the feeling is the response to the emotion. And we go below the feeling down into the emotion, and we say, okay, what am I truly experiencing here? What is the emotion? And the emotion could be shame. It could be guilt. It could be sadness. It could be fear. And so we honor what's underneath. And so step 1 is all about realizing, okay? Step 2 is about reconnecting. And so that's honoring and accepting. This is, I honor and accept how I feel. The key in step 2 is non-judgmental, unconditional acceptance. This is how I feel. This is what I said. and I may be ashamed of what I said, I may regret what I said or did, but we're accepting ourselves with complete compassionate love. All right? The kind of love that we are given every day that we typically don't even turn towards. Okay, so there's this beautiful love that exists within us and around us, and that's the love that we come into in step 2. It's all about honoring ourselves. It's all about loving ourselves, especially the parts of us that we have yet to learn to love. Okay? So these parts are coming up, these situations, these cycles, these patterns, they come up in our life because healing is calling. All right? So then step 3 is to release. So in step 3, we learn to let go, forgive, listen to our needs. So if we're feeling guilt or shame or humiliation or embarrassment or sadness or disappointment, we honor, okay, well, what do I need in this moment? What is it that I need? Do I need to forgive myself? Do I need to forgive someone else? Do I need 5 minutes to myself? Sometimes what we need is not possible in the moment. Let's say, well, I need a month to myself, or I need a weekend retreat. And that may not be possible in the moment, but what can I give myself now so that I can feel better now? Okay? So that's the 3-step rediscovery process. And what I'll say is that one of the main keys that helped me from moving from trauma to trust is taking aligned action. I even want to cry in this moment because it's so important for us to be able to trust ourselves and to take action that feels good to us, that feels in alignment to us, that our soul is giving us, that our intuition is providing us. And then to take that action in love and in trust, because we have been called here to do wonderful, miraculous things. And the trauma was a part of our journey. It doesn't define who we are. It allows us to heal from that and then to step in to who we truly are and what we've come here to do. And here's what I'll say. Action is healing. Action can be healing. We don't necessarily need to go to a Reiki session or to a therapist session. Sometimes, now I recommend going to both of those because I love those. But sometimes all that's needed is for us to take aligned action, to listen to our heart and take that one small step that may be really big for us, like listening to our heart, like saying the kind word to ourselves, like speaking kindly to others, and like apologizing. So if you're looking for more resources, you could go to www.rootedinworth.org. It is my nonprofit, and I have rooted resources there, and which you can gain access to for a donation. I create the blogs and the video for Rooted in Worth. I'm sending you so much love, and until next time, have a great day.